Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So wherever you're joining us, whether it's California, Idaho, Michigan, Florida, we just want to say thank you for joining us today as we continue to delve deeper and deeper into this ancient text. And so before we do, we always want to remind people, we want to try to grow this YouTube channel. So please consider sharing YouTube with your friends, specifically this channel, and any teaching that you find really helpful. We've grown in other ways, different platforms, but this one, we'd really like to see it begin to take off more and more this year. So as always, we start by reminding you of the book we're delving into, Genesis. Right? Here at Ethos, we do a lot of deep study. We look at the words, we look at the original context, we ask who the audience is. We do all of that because we think the Bible is worth spending time understanding. Because once I think you understand the original context, that's when real application begins to take place. And so we take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources to really give you the best, most full interpretation we can find by looking at all different rabbis' interpretations, by looking at different contextual pieces. So much information we try to wade through in order to give you this. So we're reading the book of Genesis, which again we understand is not a history book, right? Genesis, the whole point, the whole reason this is written, along with, again, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Torah, all these other books, the whole point is that they are in Babylonian captivity, 587 BC, and they're asking the question in the middle of captivity, how do we keep our tribe alive, right? How do we hold on to our Hebrew roots, our virtues, our rituals? How do we hold on to this? Because so many of the other tribes, they were essentially, they were giving up. They were basically taking all of Babylon's gods, all of their traditions, and they were just accepting them as theirs. But the Hebrews are a different breed of people, aren't they? They're a different kind of tribe, and they said, we are not going to assimilate. And so the whole point of writing Torah was not to remind them of their literal history. It was to remind them who they are, who they aren't. It was a response to the fears of assimilation. So every time Torah, this ancient scroll, is brought out to a Jewish community, there's celebration, right? Because here is our identity right in front of us. And they would have a rabbi who would sit on a stool, much like I'm doing, and they would interpret different pieces of this ancient scroll that, again, always reminded them, this is who we are, this is who we aren't. This is the direction we should be heading. And this is the direction we shouldn't be heading, right? Reminding them of patterns, reminding them of different moments in their lives and their tribe's journey where maybe we could learn from that, right? And that's really the point of history, not literal history, but retelling of the story. And so today we finish up with chapter 25. Last week, we moved through chapters 1 through, I believe, 23. So today, we're going to move through chapter 25, 24 through 34. And so, as always, what I'll do, I'll read the section first, and then I'll go back and I will look through all these different places in which we get a lot of interesting perspective. And truthfully, not every single word is going to give you something valuable, but there is always a jewel somewhere in this verse. And so that's what I'm constantly looking for. I'm always looking at what the words mean. If there's any interesting interpretation, that's what we do. We delve in really deep. So here we go. Let's start with reading it together. And her days to give birth were completed. And behold, there were twins in her womb, right? And the first one emerged ruddy. He was completely like a coat of hair, and they named him Esau. And afterwards, his brother emerged, and his hand was grasping Esau's heel, and he named him Jacob. Now Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. So as the youth grew up, and Esau was a man who understood hunting, a man of the field, whereas Jacob was an innocent man dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau, because game was in his mouth, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now Jacob cooked a pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was feeling faint, is what it says. And Esau said to Jacob, "Pour into me some of this red pottage, for I am faint." He was therefore named Edom. And Jacob said, "Sell me, as of this day, your birthright." Many of you have heard this story, yeah. Esau replies, "Behold, I'm going to die, so why do I need this birthright?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him, and he sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and a pottage of lentils, and he ate and drank and arose and left, and Esau despised the birthright. Interesting story, right? And so let's try to delve in here. Let's move through this text a little bit. So here we go. Afterwards, his brother emerged, and his hand was grasping Esau's heel. So this is an interesting idea here. Many people will try to take this very literally, right? They'll say, "Oh, it's a literal picture. He was literally holding on to his brother's heel as they come out." Well, we can't know that unless, of course, it looks like this, right? This picture. He's literally holding on. But there's something much deeper here. This is an interesting Hebraic phrase. And what most people will miss about this, it's a really kind of beautiful one. It's a really fascinating one when you understand Israel and the context that they're in. So listen to this, this interpretation of the text by one rabbi. He says, grasping the heel means for Israel that in order to rise to power, experiencing our promise, we must be willing to hold on to the heel of our enemies as they rise and wait until the promise is handed to us. That, when I saw that quote, I thought, oh man, the whole thing makes sense. Before I took it very literally. He's literally holding on, but no, this actually means something so much deeper. Again, remember, this is being written to a people who are in the middle of captivity. And so Israel, they will do this. They'll hold on to the heel of Babylon, Egypt, Persia, Rome, right? This is a deep message to Israel that using your enemy's wake is going to help you in the long run, right? It's a brilliant strategy. It's a brilliant strategy for conflict, really. And so it takes a deep patience, right? At some point in time, your enemy, if you hold on long enough, your enemy is going to at some point hand you back your freedom. You will experience your birthright. Yeah, I know. So good. It continues on in verse 27. Esau was a man who understood hunting, a man of the field, whereas Jacob was an innocent man, dwelling in tents. So 2 points here, really important to understand. Esau, here in this text, he's a man that hunts. His whole being, his reliance, what gives him life, what sustains him, is death. Right? He is consuming. He's taking the land. He's taking resources. He's taking. And this is what's going to sustain him. Right? And again, Esau, we're going to find out, is connected to Israel's enemies at some point, right? So again, interesting to consider Israel's enemies, the tribes that go the other direction. They are constantly just taking. It's what empires do, right? We go to other countries, we take their resources, constantly sustaining life by taking life. This is the person of Esau. And so then, if that's the person of Esau, Israel pictures themselves as Jacob. And so understand this about Jacob. Jacob dwells in tents, right? It says he dwells in tents. The idea here in the Hebrew, he sits with wisdom. He waits for his moment. This was the idea. There's a moment, there's a patience involved in this. And so when it talks about a tent maker, the deeper idea here is Jacob is one that is waiting patiently for the moment. Yeah. So you have Israel and their enemies. You getting it so far? The whole setup. This is a deeper metaphor. You can take the story literally, of course, you can do that. But you would miss the deeper metaphor, the deeper message that Israel is getting when they hear this specific story. And so it continues that one is very rash. And so it'll give all these descriptions of Esau. One's rash, the other perceptive, contemplative. One jumps into battles, the other one steps back. One takes, the other gives. One is violent, the other shows mercy. One kills their enemies, one shows grace, love, patience. It's beautiful. So you have two different ways of living in the world, right? And so verse 28, Isaac loved Esau because game was in his mouth. Yeah, I hope you heard that right. And again, I pull from the original interpretation. So this is not an NIV. This would be the closest we can get to the Hebrew. And so what does it mean game is in his mouth, right? What does that even mean? Here's what one interpretation is. Isaac, again, is drawn to the blood, the violence of the hunt. While Rebekah, what she sees in her son is this deeper patience in the middle of conflict, right? That's interesting thing. Waiting your enemy out rather than attacking openly. I want you to remember these times Israel's in the middle of captivity. I think immediately of Rome, right? When Jesus is sharing the message of learning to peacefully live with your enemies, his people will later on, they will attack their enemies, right? He says, the writer says, look, I'm so, it makes me so sad to think about the people who in the end of this era don't get to run to the hills, right? Because we know in 70 AD, that temple is destroyed again. And why is it destroyed? Well, because years before, Israel decided to take back their empire through violence. And when they tried to take it back through violence, man, woman, children, whoever wasn't able to flee to those hills there in Jerusalem, they were murdered right there on the street. And so, again, two different ways of dealing with your enemies. One is brash, one is violent, the other is merciful, loving, kind, forgiving. Two different ways. I'll continue. Verse 29 and 30. Now Jacob cooked a pottage. Again, it was basically like porridge. And Esau came from the field and he was faint. Esau said to Jacob, pour into me some of this red pottage, for I am faint. He was therefore named Edom. So notice the story here. Esau has become reliant on Jacob. Again, this is not a story really about two brothers. This is a story about two different kingdoms, the north and the south. This is also a story about two different ways of living in the world. This is a story about Israel and Babylon, right? And what we notice here is Babylon has basically become really reliant on Israel. Yeah, think about how many times in Jewish history have they actually been very beneficial to the countries they've been a part of. Yeah, think about that for a moment. This happens over and over again. It's a cycle. It's the very DNA of who they are. Wherever they are, they're going to do everything they can to thrive, not just survive, but thrive. And so for Israel, they seem to prosper everywhere they go. Kingdoms, because the way they prosper, because of, you could say because the divine continued to bless, right? The promise was held up. Because of this, kingdoms became reliant on Israel over and over and over again historically. It's really interesting. One writer says this, by choosing to bless our enemies and make them prosper, we grow in a deeper power than attempting to take by force. Think about that. If I can cause my enemies, the people who hate me the most, if I can cause them to prosper, if I bless them, I become a blessing, right? We bless instead of attack. We bless instead of take away. I've noticed right now there's this deeper censorship that's happening. And I've always been against censorship, whether it's been the left or the right. Politically, I've always been against censorship. I've read the books, Fahrenheit 451, 1984, V for Vendetta, the comic book. All these books have this constant warning. we have to be careful about censorship, because censorship, what it essentially is doing is it removes voices and it creates victims. And so the deeper, more intellectual way of dealing with someone's voice we don't agree with is to have conversation and offer better voices, better arguments. And this is what Jesus does in Rome. He says, look, here's some ideas about how to navigate the world that are very popular right now. But I say this, right? You have heard it said this, but I say this, right? Offer up a better idea. Don't remove a voice, because when you remove a voice, you create a victim. And we are a culture that seems to love playing the part of victim and also victimizing. But if you can add to the conversation, offer up the better order, the better idea, the more life-giving idea, you remove this act of victimization. You remove the violence and the bitter reactions. You offer something better. And I think that's so beautiful. This is the idea, the more intelligent way. Jacob offers Esau soup, right? Brilliant. I'm going to offer my enemies soup. I'm going to bless them. I'm going to give them something that's going to sustain them. For Israel, this is what they're hearing. As a nation, we are going to give our enemy something that sustains. And by doing so, we take back our freedom. We take back our birthright. Yeah. And when you get this, when you understand the story from that perspective, the whole thing begins to make sense, doesn't it? It really begins to hum. And so we'll continue. Verse 31, 32. Jacob said, "Sell me as this day your birthright." Esau replied, "Behold, I'm going to die. So why do I need this birthright?" Yes, very dramatic, right? A couple points to again consider. The birthright, this is something given to the eldest, right? So again, remember north and south, right? Judah, you have this break, this break of Judah and Israel. And so the eldest is typically, right, the one that's going to be given all the birthrights and all of this. But what if the eldest is not worthy of the gift? What if the empire is not worthy of the power it's wielding? Yeah, that's the question, because I would argue Israel does not believe Babylon is worthy of the power it's been given. And they are under the impression that all power, all of this is given by God, right? And so they don't believe Babylon's worthy of wielding this power. And so this idea here, Esau, he shows a lack of virtue, which makes us understand Babylon, Esau, they are not worthy of the power they have. That's the deeper idea. And the next, this is another reference again, Judah, Israel. The younger nation is going to become the more prosperous one. Yeah, we can see the different layers of metaphor and meaning here. And so any Hebrew is going to make this connection. And so then it continued. Jacob says, "Swear to me." So he sells the birthright. Jacob gives Esau bread. He takes the lentils, he eats it. And notice this. There's this phrase here at the end in verse 34. It says, Esau despised the birthright. Why would he despise the birthright? Why not just say, he gave it away. It didn't mean much to him. But it's very, very strong words here. Esau despises the birthright. Because Esau's short-sightedness, it basically allows his enemy to take the promise, right? Esau despised the birthright. He doesn't understand. Here's a great quote about this one. Esau despised the promise because he couldn't understand it. Yeah, he wanted the promise now. Jacob was willing to wait. And this is the sign of a true Hebrew. We wait on Yahweh. Yeah, so beautiful. We wait on Yahweh. We wait because we know the thing is coming, right? Empire likes to take. Now, right? Can't get enough power. I'm just a hungry beast. I got to fill. Whereas Israel would say, no. We wait. We have patience because the thing is worth waiting for. And when I think about this in this moment for Israel, I go right back to Jesus. I think about this moment in Luke. Luke chapter 17, verses 20 through 21, it says this. Once being asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of God would come. Again, the idea here, the kingdom, not some like thing that's going to float down or when we die, we go. That was never the point. The kingdom reality was when their people would go out of Rome and be free once again, just like they were hoping for in Babylon. When will our people be free? When will we have our temple again? And so the question is from the Pharisees, when is it going to happen? When do we have our kingdom? When do we have our freedom? When do we get our birthright back? That's the idea here. And Jesus says the kingdom of God is not something that can be observed, nor will people say, here it is, there it is, because the kingdom of God is in your midst. Think about how beautiful that would be. Again, the Hebrews have heard this told through Jeremiah. Same message. The kingdom of heaven, our birthright, is already right here. Jesus says it's happening right here. The kingdom of heaven, it can't be rushed. It actually is something that's going to take time. It's happening in you, through you, around you. And many of you, you're not even aware of it because it's slow, right? It takes patience. When I think of processes that take time, slow, patience, I think of trees, I think of plants. And I think of the root systems that they establish. These roots are going to go deep, 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 deep. Even before you begin to see some of those plants begin to offer fruit. Before you begin to see the big tree, right? And this big branches and trunk. Before all of this, that tree, that plant is digging in deep, their roots. And sometimes you're not even aware of it. It's not something that is observable right away. And so each tiny shift, each positive conversation, each cheek turned, shirt off my back given, the kingdom of heaven grows. Each time I choose to love someone rather than hate them, each time I try to offer something positive rather than silencing them, the kingdom of heaven grows. It takes patience, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so this was the message of Jesus over and over again. The message of the ancients that Jesus so often quotes. The kingdom of heaven takes time. It takes patience. And you, Israel, in the middle of all of this, learn to step back, have patience, trust the promise. It's going to take time. It's going to take time. You've been given the birthright. It's already yours, right? Nothing you can do can really take it away. It's yours. It's right there with you. Learn to have patience now in the middle of all of it. So, how can we take that home? All right, what do we do? For me, I think about patience. How to live out patience. Because Israel right here in this moment, they're impatient, right? They've been there too long, it feels like. And so how do we live out patience? Here's a couple ideas from some people who are much smarter than me. Number one, practice waiting for things. I think this is such a cool idea. When you're at a restaurant, maybe have some patience. Let a couple people go ahead of you in line. Maybe think about that. Practice waiting for things, right? Practice when you order something on Amazon, right? Don't do the get it now, right? Take time on it, right? Don't pay extra to have it delivered the next day. Maybe take time on it. I don't know. Let people go ahead of you in line. It's a brilliant thing to try. Learning to have patience, not always so rushed, because that's what we do in our culture. We rush, rush, rush. You want to send a note to someone? Maybe instead of text them, write them a letter. That's some patience, snail mail, right? Number two, stop doing things that aren't important. Be aware of what's worth waiting for and what's not. Right? Asking yourself, what is it that's valuable to me? Because once you establish the thing that's valuable, I would argue, then you can say it's worth waiting for. Right? This thing is so valuable to me. It's worthy of my time. It's worth taking time to wait for it. I don't need it right away because the roots are digging deep. Number three, be mindful of the things you're impatient about. I like this idea. If it's worth waiting for, stop, remind yourself of this, right? Just stop. Sometimes in life, things take time. And so remind yourself of this, and you can control this desire to have these knee-jerk reactions. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves this thing is worth waiting for, and I'm about to be impatient with it. And then lastly, relax. Take some deep breaths, right? Yeah, take some deep breaths. Relax. Take it all in. Sometimes our bodies don't always follow our thoughts like we'd like them to, right? So sometimes stopping, breathing, relaxing, finding a calm, that's going to cause our mind and our souls to follow suit. And so all of this, I pray that this week you're going to find some patience, and you might be able to practice it as it becomes like a habit for you too. I hope you enjoyed this study today. This was a lot of fun. Again, Jacob, Esau, Israel, Babylon, North, South, Israel, Judah. I think you're getting it. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture of how to get along, right? How to have patience, how to trust the promise. So as always, please consider going to ethos-church.org/donate. We're a tax-deductible organization, so please consider here at the end of the year, please consider walking with us, donating, helping us continue this ministry. And join us often as you can. Whenever we have these conversations online, we'd love to have you be a part of that. And as always, hit that subscribe button and share these videos with everyone you know. We love you, and we can't wait to see you next week as we delve into the next chapter, chapter 26. Take care. We'll see you next week.